wall head on. He had to be cut out of his vehicle, rushed to the hospital, but Dale Earnhardt is dead, one of NASCAR's greatest drivers ever. We are joined now by Whit Watson and Jerry Punch for much, much more on this sad situation. Whit.
David, thank you very much. It would have been, should have been a wonderful day for Michael Waltrip, who did break through and win the Daytona 500, his first ever career Winston Cup victory after 15 years of racing. Instead, the racing world mourns the loss of one of its greatest champions. Dr. Jerry Punch is with us on the show. And Doctor, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time. I know how difficult this is because you're very close to the family. But if you could, try to put into words what the loss will mean to the racing world.
Well, I'm not sure you can. I'm having a hard time just finding the words right now because Dale Earnhardt is, it's hard to say was, but was one of my best friends for many, many years. You know, it's ironic that people talk about Dale Earnhardt and how selfish he was on the racetrack, how much he cared about himself on the racetrack because he was a winner and he wanted to win when he buckled that helmet on. But those of us who knew him knew that he was really a very, very unselfish individual off the racetrack. And the irony is that today, for the first time that I can remember, and I've known this man a long, long time, you saw him be very, very unselfish in those final few laps. He had a car that could have made a move, in my opinion. Following this sport for 20 years. He could have pulled up in front of Sterling Marlin, maybe Kenny Schrader, probably drafted by and won his second Daytona 500. But what he did in those final laps was what a father would do for a son. Ironically, that was his son right in front of him, Dale Earnhardt Jr., or what a brother would do for a brother. And Michael Waltrip was like the little brother that he didn't have. And he stayed there and ran 185 mile per hour screen as a pick, and he kept Sterling Marlin back there and Kenny Schrader and those guys who didn't get a chance to get up there and fight for the win, so that his two people in front of him, his son and one of his best friends, Michael Waltrip, who he had given a chance, did have a chance. And so it was very, very unselfish of Dale Earnhardt. And it's a move that many of us who've known him for years would understand. But it's very difficult now to understand because he's gone.
Now, Doctor, again, we want to stress that we do not have the full details of the injuries to Dale Earnhardt and what precisely caused his death. But in light of the recent stories regarding safety in NASCAR and in all forms of racing, there's been talk about the Hans device, which is now mandatory on ovals in kart, also mandatory in F1 racing. Do we now need to take, yet again, a closer look at issues of safety, protecting the drivers in stock car racing?
Well, I mean, in my opinion, NASCAR racing is the safest form of racing in all of sports, all of motorsports. There's nothing safer than those race cars and 1 3/4 roll bar tubing. We saw Jeffrey Bodine's horrific tumble at Daytona last year in the truck race. We saw a tumble for Tony Stewart today, an 18-car crash in the Daytona 500. The drivers walked away. Stewart was taken to the hospital and checked out, and basically is going to be okay. What you can't predict is what happened with Dale Earnhardt, what we saw happen with Neil Bonnet a few years ago, what happened with Ernie Irvin at Michigan back in 1994, the abrupt right-hand turn up into the wall and almost head-on collision, that deceleration. In my opinion, I mean, the Hans device is a great device, and it's very difficult to talk about safety devices when we're talking about the loss of someone that we all cared about so much. But I'm not so sure the Hans device or anything at that point in time would, even as safe as these cars are, would have made that much different with that kind of massive deceleration at 185 miles an hour, because typically you get a fracture involving in the head, and those are not survivable injuries. The injuries that are the accidents that look the worst, and people say it didn't look that bad, but the injuries that are the ones that are the survivable are the violent tumbles, because those are the ones where you dissipate enough injury and you may have a broken bone or two and a concussion, but these are the bad ones, the ones where you suddenly stop and veer directly into a wall.
Dr. Jerry Punch, again, I know it's been a very difficult day for you. Thank you very much for your time. A very difficult day for all of us in the racing world. We have lost a great champion, and of course, much more on this later. David, back to you.
Well, let's take a look at just how great Dale Earnhardt was. These are his career stats: 76 career wins, the most by any active driver, 281 top 5 finishes, and 7 Winston Cup titles, tied for the most with Richard Petty. Earnhardt just an incredible career, as you can see here, tied with the King as the winningest driver in Winston Cup history as far as series titles. His last Winston Cup win was at Talladega on October 15th of last year. He was second in the points race last year. The 76 all-time Winston Cup wins, the all-time winningest in terms of money with over $41 million. It truly is a sad day, and clearly the Daytona 500 far overshadowed by the loss of Dale Earnhardt. Let's show you exactly what happened on the track at Daytona today. 195,000 on hand, packed house. A relatively quiet race until lap 175. Ward Burton's car gets loose, hits Tony Stewart, and Stewart gets some major air, starts flipping, lands on the back of another car, and then comes careening across the track. That starts a chain reaction. Jeff Gordon said it was like driving through a wall out there. 8 of last year's top 10 in the points were caught up in this thing. Stewart flipping over and over. He had a concussion. Just a horrific crash. 18 cars in all caught up in this. All sorts of damage done. And then later, check out Mark Martin's view of the crash.
It's the outside wall real hard. Gets hit again, and takes out. Labonte's car.
Now, Dale Earnhardt was not involved in that. Bobby Labonte gets out of his flaming car. Steve Park pounding the roof in frustration. Tony Stewart, a little dazed, a concussion, taken to the hospital for further evaluation. 13 to go. Michael Waltrip leading Dale Earnhardt Jr., his wife Buffy praying for her husband. Waltrip had never won, 462 starts without a win. And Earnhardt Sr. gets involved in a crash on the very last lap. Waltrip comes in to win. His brother Darrell Waltrip, you can hear him so excited up there in the booth. His wife Buffy overcome with emotion. Waltrip driving, ironically, Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s car. Michael Waltrip is the winner. He celebrated before he learned of the death of his boss, Dale Earnhardt Sr. Michael and Darrell Waltrip become the first brothers to both win the Daytona 500. NASCAR came up with a new aerodynamic package to improve the racing. 49 lead changes this year as opposed to just 9 last year. Waltrip's record now 1 in 462. He talked about the win before he heard of Earnhardt's condition.
I'm a living proof that if you just believe in yourself and you wind up in a great team like I have, all things are possible. I'm just so thankful to win this race. Dale Jr. was just so important. I can't state. I'd have never won the race if it wasn't for him. He had tons of runs where he could have pulled out and passed me. I made a couple of good blocks and got in front of him, and he pushed me right onto the front. And you know, I did my part, but he certainly could have got around me. 0 for 462 and reminded of it every day, but it never got me down. I didn't care what the record was. And the reason why I didn't care what the record was because I didn't believe it told the story. And I don't think 1 for 463 tells it much better.
It is not the first time someone's first win came at Daytona. Sterling Marlin broke out of a pretty long 0 for in '94. Derek Cope won the 500 and had just one other win in his Winston Cup career. Waltrip's best previous finish at Daytona was 5th. What should have been a great day for Michael Waltrip turns tragic. We'll have much more on Dale Earnhardt's death later in the show.